When Gaius, Julius, Caesar Augustus, Germanicus, the man history would remember as Caligula, became emperor of Rome in 37 AD, the city celebrated as if the gods themselves had sent a gift. He was the beloved son of Germanicus, a famous and adored general, and the grandson of Emperor Augustus by bloodline. People had high hopes. Senate, tired of the paranoia and cruelty of Tiberius, welcomed this young, charming leader with open arms. Caligula's nickname came from his childhood. Caligula means little boots, a name given by soldiers when he followed his father on campaigns, wearing a miniature legionary uniform. To the legions, he was a mascot. To Rome, he was the future. In his first months as emperor, Caligula was generous. He ended unpopular taxes. He held magnificent games in the Circus Maximus, freed political prisoners, called back exiled citizens, and honored the memory of his family. Rome adored him. Statues were erected. Coins bore his image. Crowds cheered his every appearance. But something changed. Only months into his rule, Caligula fell dangerously ill. Ancient historians never agreed on what it was. Some said it was poisoning, others a brain fever. He recovered, but Rome would soon wish he hadn't. The charming young ruler who promised a golden age began to show signs of cruelty. At first, it was small things. Mocking senators in public, laughing at gladiators' deaths as if it were personal entertainment, and ordering expensive banquets while raising new taxes to pay for them. Then came the fear. Caligula began executing senators on the slightest suspicion of disloyalty. Wealthy Romans were accused of treason. Their estates seized to fund his growing extravagance. Yet it wasn't only cruelty that shocked Rome. It was his strange and often insane behavior. He began to refer to himself as a living god. Statues of himself were placed in temples. He demanded to be worshipped alongside Jupiter. Messengers were sent to Jerusalem, ordering his statue to be placed in the Jewish temple. A move so outrageous, it nearly caused a revolt. And then, the sea. Caligula declared war on the god Neptune. The reasons remain a mystery, perhaps a symbol of his divine power, perhaps a complete break with reality. He ordered his legions to march to the English Channel in full armor, as if preparing for invasion. But when they arrived, there was no enemy, only waves crashing on the shore. His soldiers were commanded to attack the water, to stab at the sea with swords and spears. Afterward, they were ordered to collect seashells as spoils of war to be carried back to Rome. Caligula called it a victory. Back in the capital, he built opulent palaces, spent vast sums on games, and even began constructing a massive floating bridge so he could ride his horse across the Bay of Bai. The man Rome once loved was now feared, mocked, and whispered about in dark corners. The Senate, humiliated, plotted in silence. Caligula's reign of madness had only begun. By the second year of Caligula's reign, the golden promise of his leadership was dead. Rome was now ruled by fear, and no one, not senators, not generals, not even his own family, was safe. Caligula's paranoia grew sharper with each passing month. He believed conspiracies were everywhere, and in Rome, such suspicions were a death sentence. Accusations of treason became a convenient tool, one that filled the emperor's coffers as estates were confiscated and fortunes seized. But executions were not enough for Caligula. He seemed to take pleasure in humiliation. He made senators run beside his chariot for miles. He invited prominent Romans to dinner, only to have them publicly mocked, beaten, or killed. His cruelty extended to the games. In the arena, he ordered executions mid-match just to watch the blood spill. Gladiators were forced to fight wild animals with no weapons, and ordinary citizens unlucky enough to displease him could be thrown to the beasts on a whim. Then there were his personal obsessions. Caligula adored his horse Incitus, treating it better than most citizens. The animal had a marble stall, an ivory manger, and purple blankets. The color of royalty. Some accounts even claim he planned to make Incitatus a consul, the highest elected office in Rome, as a way to mock the Senate. And his divine delusions only grew. Caligula dressed as gods, Jupiter, Mercury, Venus, depending on his mood. He demanded sacrifices be made in his name. He began to refer to himself not just as a god, but as the Lord of all the earth. His spending spiraled out of control. The imperial treasury, once healthy, began to run dry. Its To refill it, Caligula invented new taxes on food, on marriages, on lawsuits, even on the wages of Roman soldiers. The people's love turned to resentment. Murmurs of rebellion began. But Caligula's cruelty made resistance dangerous. Entire families could be wiped out for a whisper of disloyalty. Still in private, senators and officers began to plot. The Praetorian Guard, the emperor's own bodyguards, started to question their loyalty. Rome had seen tyrants before, but Caligula was something different, unpredictable, unstable, and dangerously proud. And in the shadows of the palace, the men who had once sworn to protect him were now sharpening their daggers. By early 41 AD, Caligula had been emperor for less than 4 years. But for Rome, it felt like a lifetime. The Senate despised him, people feared him, and even the Praetorian Guard, the men sworn to defend his life, were turning against him. The breaking point came in January. Caligula announced new plans to expand his power, including moving to Egypt so he could rule from the ancient home of the pharaohs, where kings were treated as living gods. To the Senate, this was both a humiliation and a threat. If the emperor left Rome, he could return at the head of a foreign army. But for the conspirators, opportunity struck sooner than expected. On January 24th, Caligula attended a series of theatrical performances in the palace complex. Surrounded by courtiers, entertainers, and bodyguards, he was relaxed, too relaxed. As he walked through an underground passage, a man stepped forward. It was Cassius Chaerea, a senior officer of the Praetorian Guard. Caligula had mocked him relentlessly in public, calling him names and questioning his courage. Now, Chaerea would have his revenge. The first blow was swift, a dagger into the emperor's neck. Caligula staggered, screaming, but more men joined in. In seconds, the most feared man in Rome was on the ground, his body stabbed over 30 times. The assassins did not stop there. They killed his wife Caesonia and his young daughter to prevent any claim to the throne. Chaos erupted in the palace. The Senate briefly debated restoring the Republic, but the Praetorian Guard had other plans. They seized Caligula's uncle, Claudius, and declared him emperor. And so, the reign of Caligula ended as violently as it had been lived, in blood, betrayal, and madness. In the years to come, stories of his cruelty and insanity would grow, whispered in taverns and written by historians. Whether all the tales were true or exaggerated, one thing was certain. Caligula had left his mark on Rome, not as a great ruler, but as a warning. The man who had once been the hope of the empire had become its nightmare. The sea he had once conquered kept its silence.